In this video, I want to give a few comments to General Zaluzhny's interview in The Economist. General Zaluzhny is Ukraine's chief of defense, and his comments were quite pessimistic. He describes how Ukraine's summer offensive has delivered disappointing results and how the war now looks like a positional stalemate. And he paints a picture that Russia is in a good position to win a long war of attrition. So let's talk about it. This is going to be a pretty short video, I think. My apologies for not making videos for a while. It's been a hectic month for me. The reason is that I have published a book. It's this one. It's called The Logic of War, and it's an introduction to what you need to know to understand modern warfare. It's my first real book. I've written chapters in academic books, but this is the first time I've published an entire book. So that has taken a lot of my time, and there just hasn't been enough time to also make videos. But hopefully I will have more time to make videos now that the book is out. It's only in Danish for now, unfortunately. I hope it will be published in English at a later point, but that sort of depends on the publisher finding an international partner that wants to do it. But if you can read Danish and you want to get this book, you can get it now. I will leave a link down in the video description to where you can get it on my website. But all right, that was just an explanation of why it's been a bit silent on this channel for some weeks. And about Zaluzhny's interview, I will not go through all the things he said. Like, you can find summaries online because it really has created a lot of attention. So what I want to do instead is to just say a few words about the context and how I think we should think about the interview. It's by now clear that the Ukrainian summer offensive has been a disappointment in terms of the results that have been achieved. I think when we look at the war in the big perspective and we talk about the different phases that the war has, then I think it makes sense to say that the Ukrainian summer offensive has finished and that we are now in a new phase where the main theme is a Russian offensive. So that is mostly the Russian push on the city of Avdiivka. So far, it's not been particularly successful for Russia. They have taken very big losses and they have not been able to substantially break the Ukrainian lines, but they're still pushing on. And I think it's also too soon to say to say how it will end. But I think it is fair, at least, to say that Russia has managed to take the overall initiative in the war. Their attack on Avdiivka has effectively ended the phase where Ukraine had the initiative, and now Ukraine is instead fighting a defensive battle. That is not necessarily a bad thing for Ukraine. Like, all offensives come to an end, and just because they run out of energy, and then you need a break to reconstitute and to prepare for a new push. And that is not necessarily because of the attrition, that it's so hard that you can't push on, but it can also just be that your logistics can't keep up. So for example, during an offensive, Ukraine uses more artillery ammunition than they're being provided by their allies. So they have to save up ammunition before an offensive, and then eventually they run out and they have to take a break to stockpile some more. And that does not mean that Ukraine's offensive ambitions are sort of dropped or anything like that. It just means that for a while, Ukraine is playing a mostly defensive role while they are preparing for a new offensive at a later point. So Ukraine's offensive was coming to an end, and on the other hand, Russia seems to be getting quite a lot of ammunition from especially North Korea, and apparently the Russian leaders decided that the autumn mud season was the perfect timing for an offensive because they started the offensive just before the mud season began. I think it's probably political pressure that made the generals do this, because from a military point of view, the timing is not great. But Putin is having a re-election in March, so I think he would like to show off some victories. So the context for Zaluzhny's interview is that Ukraine's summer offensive has been disappointing. If we go back 6 months, then the expectations were very big. Like, both in Ukraine and in the West, there were hopes that this offensive could effectively end the war, or at least it could change the direction of the war in a decisive way. So it would push Russia so much backward that it would force Putin to the negotiating table, and then Putin would be willing to make significant compromises that could end the war. And all that has not materialized at all. And there were many reasons for this, and I've talked about that in different videos, but the short version is that Ukraine and NATO misunderstood the situation. Like, they imagined that it would be a kind of fast blitzkrieg style maneuver warfare, and that was what the Western countries then equipped Ukraine to do. They gave them tanks and infantry fighting vehicles and tools for that kind of warfare, but it did not work for a variety of reasons, and instead Ukraine had to change to a more attritional approach. And in the big perspective, I think that what we're seeing in the public debate in these months is a kind of renegotiation of how Ukraine and the West can understand the war, like that there is no quick fix, that there is still a long war ahead of us. And I think Russia has an advantage in that they realized this already last year. If we look at the full-scale invasion in the big perspective, then it started with a Russian idea of sort of a quick victory, like that they could win the war in a matter of days or weeks. And then when that didn't happen, what we saw were these images of Putin where he looked like he was having a nervous breakdown, like he was shaking, he had to hold the table not to shake his hands, and everyone was talking about how he was sick. But all that led to a Russian realization that this would be a long war. But then this idea of a quick Russian victory was then actually, ironically, replaced by an idea of a quick Ukrainian victory. So that was the expectation for the summer offensive. And I think what we're seeing right now is that people are trying to come to terms with the realization that this is not going to work. There is no quick fix. So this is going to be a long war. And to some extent, I think we can understand all this talk about war fatigue in the West as a sort of expression of the same thing that made Putin look like he had Parkinson's, right? It's that coming to terms with the fact that there will not be a quick victory and that we just need to regain our ground in all this. And I think that is the context in which we should understand Zaluzhny's interview. And of course, a person like Zaluzhny is not sharing his thoughts here just to contribute to a sort of an academic understanding of what's going on. Like, when he makes an interview like that, and it's because he wants to achieve something. So we should ask ourselves, what is it that he hopes to get out of all this? And I think it's pretty clear. We should understand this interview as a call to action for the West. This is Zaluzhny telling us, okay, we now understand that this will be a long war. It's time to stop talking about it. Let's make a strategy for how to win. And then he also goes out and he more or less takes full responsibility for all the mistakes and the misjudgments that led to the poor results from the summer offensive. And I think if we look at it, then that's quite generous of him. I think it's pretty clear that there are some military advisors in the West that are to blame also for misreading the situation and for telling the Western politicians that if we just give Ukraine some tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, then everything will be fine. But Zaluzhny goes out and he takes everything on his shoulders in this interview, and that's basically also a way of saying, like, let's not get hung up in this discussion about who is to blame for the past. Like, let's look ahead, let's make a strategy. And then the last comment I want to make is on Zaluzhny's prediction that Russia is in a better position to endure in a long war. I'm not sure that I agree with his point entirely from a military point of view. Like, there are big problems in Russia too, and it will be hard for them to sustain this war. I want to recommend Perun's video on Russian defense production that came out some time back. It's pretty clear that they are also on the Russian side struggling to keep their army rolling at this pace of attrition. But from a political point of view, I think Zaluzhny's statement is absolutely valid because it is a reminder that Russia still has offensive ambitions. In the Western debate about war fatigue and those things, it's like sometimes people forget that Russia actually also want to win the war. Like, people talk about it as if if the West stops sending assistance to Ukraine, then somehow magically there will be a peace deal. And that's just not the case. I made a video about that Western misunderstanding that peace is an option that is on the table for Ukraine. It's not. And that is what Zaluzhny is reminding us here, that if the West does not get on board with a sustainable long-term strategy for the war, then the alternative is not a peace deal, but it is that Russia will start to make progress again. So again, it's a call to action. Okay, I will end it here. Those were my thoughts on how I think we should understand the interview in The Economist in a sort of broader perspective. If you found it interesting or informative, please give it a like, and also subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get notifications when I upload new videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time.